One QR code had already cost me 12 years of work. Now Luo Xinxin stood at the front of the classroom, promising our class a 5-star hotel, perfect silence, and nutritious meals before the gaokao, China's national entrance exam. Everyone rushed to pay. My childhood friend, Zhou Yan, praised her loudest of all. None of them knew she would pocket most of the money, abandon them in a filthy guest house, and serve spoiled food. I knew because I had already lived through that disaster once. This time, when her payment code reached my desk, my answer was simple. The clattering ceiling fan and the roar of classroom chatter crashed into my ears. The sour smell of sweat in the summer heat pulled me sharply back to reality. I stared at the familiar desks, then at the payment code glowing on Luo Xinxin's phone. I had been reborn, returned to the exact day she began collecting hotel money from class 1201. At the front of the room, Luo Xinxin wore a thin white chiffon dress, her hair arranged in 2 braids that fell over her chest. She smiled sweetly, waved her phone in the air, and spoke in a sugary, carefully practiced voice. "Everyone, my uncle manages the International Hotel, right beside our exam center. Normally you have to book a month in advance to get a room there. But because he's doing me a special favor, he managed to reserve an entire VIP floor for our class at an extremely low price. Hurry and scan the code to pay. We'll stay together, support each other, and review during the final hours. I don't want anyone in our class to be left behind." The boys immediately cheered their approval. They crowded around the podium and competed to praise her. Zhou Yan was the most enthusiastic. He sprang to his feet and thumped his chest proudly, as if Luo Xinxin were family. "Our Xinxin is incredible. I checked online the other day. The International Hotel has been fully booked for ages, and the prices are sky high. Thanks to Xinxin, we're saving a fortune and still getting luxury rooms. We'll owe Xinxin forever. I'll transfer the money first." That's right. Our class representative is the best. Unlike some girls who complain about everything but never accomplish anything. Several girls looked displeased by the boys' sarcastic remarks. But the pressure to show class unity won out. One by one, they took out their phones and scanned the code. Luo Xinxin walked from desk to desk with her phone, thanking everyone while barely concealing her smugness. When she reached me, she stopped, lifted her chin, and thrust the QR code in front of my face. "Jiang Yue, everyone else has paid. You're the only one left. Hurry up and scan it." I remained seated, my cold gaze sweeping over her carefully made-up face. Memories of that nightmarish guesthouse surged back. In the life I had just escaped, Luo Xinxin had pocketed most of the money and herded us into a damp, run-down guesthouse beside an all-night construction site and a karaoke bar that blasted music until dawn. The walls were stained with mold, the sheets smelled damp, and the noise never stopped. She ordered spoiled, foul-smelling boxed meals for the class to save even more money, then secretly slipped away to sleep in a luxury hotel. When I exposed the truth and tried to leave, Zhou Yan and the other boys surrounded me. They called me spoiled and selfish and said I was destroying class unity. They threw my suitcase into a muddy puddle and locked me inside the worst room so I could reflect on my behavior. By morning, everyone was vomiting and clutching their stomachs. I developed a high fever and severe stomach pain, then collapsed over my exam paper as sweat soaked my admission slip. I could only watch as 12 years of work slipped away. This time, I would never make the same mistake again. "I'm not paying," I answered flatly. My voice was not loud, but it was enough to silence the noise around us. For the entrance exam, I prefer to stay alone somewhere quiet. I'll book my own room, so there's no need to trouble the class representative. The moment I finished speaking, Luo Xinxin's smile froze. She lowered her phone, bit her bottom lip, and her eyes quickly reddened. She looked as though I had cruelly bullied her. "Jiang Yue, what do you mean? Do you think the rooms I found aren't good enough? Do you know how much effort it took for me to beg my uncle for this discounted rate? It's fine if you don't care about my feelings, but you can't look down on our class spirit like this." As she spoke, tears began to fall. Her sobs immediately enraged every boy in the room. Zhou Yan rushed over and stood protectively in front of Luo Xinxin, glaring at me. Jiang Yue, are you crazy? Don't act like some spoiled princess here. Everyone paid, and everyone agreed to stay together. What gives you the right to separate yourself from us? Are you trying to show off? I looked up at the boy who had grown up beside me. Our families had known each other for years, and we had grown up together. Yet the moment Luo Xinxin shed a single tear, Zhou Yan turned on me without hesitation. In my previous life, the same hand now pointing at my face had thrown my suitcase into the mud. Coldness spread through my chest and extinguished the last trace of goodwill I had left. I had planned to remind everyone to verify the hotel information carefully. Now I chose silence. If they were determined to ignore every warning sign, that was their choice. Zhou Yan, mind your own business. I crossed my arms and spoke slowly. Does your idea of class unity mean forcing everyone to do what you want? The money is in my pocket. How I spend it is my decision. If you want to stay together, go ahead, I don't. The boys around us immediately began shouting accusations. Jiang Yue, you're going too far. Xinxin is only trying to help everyone. Instead of being grateful, you give her that attitude. You're unbelievably selfish. So what if your grades are good? With a personality like yours, you'll still be useless in society. No wonder you're always isolated. Nobody wants to be friends with you. Xinxin, stop crying. Ignore her. Our class will have fun without her. Maybe we'll even do better on the exam if she isn't there. Luo Xinxin hid behind Zhou Yan and wiped her tears, her voice choked with grievance. I'm fine, everyone. Maybe Jiang Yue comes from a wealthy family and is used to living comfortably. So, she doesn't want to stay with people like us. I was the one who meddled too much and brought this humiliation on myself. Her words made everything worse. In the eyes of a group of impulsive 18-year-olds, she had turned me into an arrogant rich girl who looked down on everyone else. Their gazes filled with hostility and contempt. Breathing hard with anger, Zhou Yan slammed his palm onto my desk. Fine, Jiang Yue, you're impressive, but if anything happens later, don't come crawling back to apologize. Go off on your own. I'd like to see what kind of result you get. I looked at the noisy crowd and found them ridiculous. They had no idea they were walking into disaster. I stood, refusing to explain another word, and calmly packed my books into my bag. I zipped it shut, slung it over my shoulder, and let my gaze pass over Luo Xinxin's smug face, half hidden behind fake tears, before settling on Zhou Yan's flushed expression. Remember what you just said. My money and my life are my responsibility. With that, I turned and walked out of the suffocating classroom, leaving behind the insults and false praise. The moment I stepped through the school gate, my phone began buzzing nonstop in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw that a timid girl from our class had secretly sent me a series of screenshots. They had created a new group chat called the 1201 Family Does Not Welcome the Ungrateful. I scrolled through the messages, the corner of my mouth lifting in a cold smile. Everyone, don't be angry with Jiang Yue. Maybe her family has been having money problems lately, and the room fee is too expensive for her. I'm the class representative. But I wasn't considerate enough. I should have offered to pay her share myself. Luo Xinxin added a sobbing emoji. Zhou Yan immediately rushed to comfort her. Xinxin, stop being foolish. You worked so hard for the whole class. Why should you suffer for someone like her? If she doesn't have money, she should just say so instead of pretending to be above everyone. The entrance exam is so important, she's staying alone, and if something happens, the school might punish us. Then she'll probably cry and blame the entire class. The other boys eagerly joined in. She has no idea how to appreciate kindness. Xinxin swallowed her pride and begged her uncle, the hotel manager, for all of us, but Jiang Yue still acted like that. She isn't grateful, and she still gives us attitude. I bet she'll fail this exam miserably. Forget her, guys. Let her fend for herself. When she's wandering the streets because she can't find a room, she'd better not kneel and beg Xinxin to let her stay. Xinxin, stop crying. Tomorrow we'll take you out for hot pot to cheer you up. We can't let one rotten apple ruin the unity of our class. As I read the messages, my disgust reached its limit. They had accepted every word Luo Xinxin said without question. Zhou Yan was determined to play her protector, even if it meant attacking the childhood friend who had grown up beside him. They called me stingy and selfish, never realizing they were paying for their own disaster. I deleted every screenshot, blocked Zhou Yan's number, and left the old class group. I had no time to argue with fools. Time was more precious than gold now. I opened a hotel booking app. My exam center was in the heart of the city. During gaokao week, every nearby hotel was either fully booked or charging outrageous prices. I searched directly for the Daijing Hotel. It was the most luxurious 5-star hotel in the area, located beside the exam center, and less than 300 meters from the school gate. The system showed only one room remaining, the most expensive VIP suite on the top floor, fully soundproofed, with a private butler and meals designed for students taking the exam. 3 days and 2 nights cost 20,000 yuan. That was an enormous amount for a high school student. Without hesitating for even a second, I pressed the payment button. The scholarships I had saved over the past 3 years, together with the allowance my parents had given me, were transferred at once. The screen displayed reservation successful. Money could be earned again, but I had only one future and one life. I needed a full night's sleep, a settled stomach, and the clearest possible mind when I entered the exam room. I would earn the highest score I could, prove them wrong, and secure my own future. Just as I was about to put my phone away, a message arrived from Tang Ning. She was our class monitor, a gentle, hardworking girl from a family that was not well off. In my previous life, Tang Ning had also been caught in Luo Xinxin's trap. Her food poisoning became so severe that she had to abandon the rest of the entrance exam. Jiang Yue, are you home yet? I can't shake this bad feeling. The hotel is so luxurious, but Xinxin charged us so little that I'm afraid something is wrong. Should I ask for my money back? Or should you and I find a room outside and share it? I'll pay half. My fingers stopped over the keyboard as a brutal image from my previous life flashed through my mind. That night, when I exposed the truth about the filthy guest house and Zhou Yan's group of boys surrounded and threatened me, I looked to Tang Ning for help. I knew she was trembling with fear too. But faced with Zhou Yan's vicious stare and Luo Xinxin's manipulative crying, Tang Ning lowered her head, stepped back, and shut her room door tightly. She chose silence to protect herself. She watched the crowd throw my suitcase into the mud and lock me inside a room that reeked of damp mold. I knew Tang Ning was not a bad person. She was afraid, but when I had needed help, her fear had left me trapped. After being reborn, I was no longer willing to make myself responsible for everyone else's choices. I would not invite trouble into my life out of pity, especially when my future was at stake. Someone as easily swayed by the crowd as Tang Ning could become a serious risk if Luo Xinxin turned everyone against me again. I quickly typed a reply. Trust your own judgment. I've already booked a room for myself. You need to decide what to do. After sending it, I switched on Do Not Disturb and cut myself off from the class chat. I could see my classmates standing at the edge of a bad decision. But I refused to make that decision my responsibility. I had given Tang Ning enough information to question the plan. What she did with that warning was up to her. 3 days later, the classroom atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. Everyone was packing books and preparing to meet that afternoon for check-in. Luo Xinxin moved energetically between the rows of desks with a stack of glossy color printouts. She handed one to each student and announced proudly, "These are the hotel reservation confirmations. Keep them safe. At exactly 5 this afternoon, we'll meet at the school gate. My uncle's vehicle will pick up the whole class and take us directly to the hotel. I've already asked the chef to prepare a nutritious dinner that will help everyone concentrate. Just relax and do your best on the exam." The class again erupted in grateful praise. They held sheets printed with an image of a magnificent hotel lobby, their faces full of longing and absolute trust in Luo Xinxin. Zhou Yan walked past my desk holding his confirmation sheet. He deliberately slapped it onto my desk with a sharp crack. Leaning forward with both hands braced against the tabletop, he looked at me with narrow, mocking eyes. Well, Jiang Yue, you must have exhausted yourself running around looking for a room these past few days. I heard every hotel around the exam center has been fully booked for ages. If you apologize to Xinxin now, I'll ask her to speak to her uncle and put a folding bed in the hallway for you. It would still be better than sleeping under a bridge with the mosquitoes. From across the room, Luo Xinxin called out in her usual gentle, self-righteous tone. Zhou Yan, stop teasing Jiang Yue. She has too much pride. She would rather suffer than ask anyone for help. We should respect her decision. I slowly raised my head and met Zhou Yan's triumphant gaze. There was no anger and no argument. I carefully placed my pencil case and exam admission card into a waterproof document folder, then zipped my bag shut. The food prepared by Xinxin's uncle's hotel must be delicious, I said. The corner of my mouth lifted as I added, make sure you eat plenty. Don't waste the class representative's kindness. Zhou Yan froze for a second, apparently missing the warning. He snorted, turned away, and muttered, You're unbelievable. Let's see how pale and pathetic you look when you drag yourself into the exam room tomorrow. I put my backpack over my shoulder and left the classroom without looking back. The loud laughter and endless praise of Luo Xinxin echoed behind me. They were intoxicated by the glittering trap they had helped set for themselves. At 5 in the afternoon on June South, only 15 hours remained before the entrance exam officially began. In the sweltering late afternoon heat, I pulled my silver suitcase from a taxi. Before me stood the Daijing Hotel, the tallest building in the city center. Its main lobby gleamed with polished marble beneath brilliant crystal chandeliers. A neatly uniformed bell attendant immediately came forward to take my luggage. The entire check-in process took less than 5 minutes. My key card produced a soft beep against the door of the top floor VIP suite. The door opened onto a spacious room with soft wool carpeting. The air-conditioned room was cool and spotless. Most important of all, the windows were made of double-layered, soundproof glass. The moment I closed the door, every horn and engine outside vanished, leaving absolute silence. I placed my books on the large desk, went into the bathroom, and filled the tub with hot water. Everything was ready for the exam the next morning. At the same time, in another part of the city, Class 1201's ordeal began. A coach dropped more than 40 students at a dusty intersection. Luo Xinxin led the way, waving for everyone to drag their suitcases after her. The group followed excitedly, still imagining what the VIP floor of a luxury hotel would look like. They eagerly discussed whether they would stay up solving practice questions together or play cards to relax. But the farther they walked, the narrower the road became. Luo Xinxin led them into a cramped, dark alley. Household garbage was piled along both sides, giving off a foul stench. Suitcase wheels became stuck in muddy puddles, and dirty water splashed across the hems of their spotless, white uniforms. Xinxin, where is the hotel? Why are we going into this alley? One girl complained, covering her nose against the heavy smell of dampness. Luo Xinxin did not turn around. Her steps grew slightly hurried. We're almost there. Just keep going a little longer. At last, the group stopped before a dilapidated 2-story building with a sagging, corrugated metal roof. A broken neon sign flickered with the words PIAC, IGUIETHAT-OUAI. The glass door was cloudy with grime. Behind the reception counter, the landlady had her feet propped on a chair while she cracked sunflower seeds and spat the shells carelessly onto the stained concrete floor. The air was thick with the smell of cheap cigarettes, mothballs, and stale frying oil. The students stopped dead, unable to believe their eyes. This is your uncle's 5-star hotel, a furious boy shouted, throwing his suitcase to the ground. Are you joking? Even pigs wouldn't stay here. Luo Xinxin bit her lip, and her eyes immediately reddened. She stepped back, twisting the hem of her dress between her fingers, looking unbearably pitiful. I'm sorry, everyone. Yesterday, an official delegation suddenly arrived at the International Hotel and took over all the rooms. Even my uncle couldn't do anything. I was afraid everyone would have nowhere to stay. So I went out in the rain early this morning and searched everywhere. I visited more than 10 hotels before I managed to rent this entire guest house for our class. I only wanted what was best for everyone. I didn't want anyone sleeping on the street the night before the exam. Tears overflowed and rolled down her cheeks. It was a flawless performance. She had clearly swallowed the enormous price difference and pushed her classmates toward disaster. Yet from her mouth, her greed became a noble sacrifice for the group. The angry students fell silent. A few still muttered in dissatisfaction. But this place is horrible. Look at the mold on the walls and the yellow stains on the sheets. It's disgusting. How are we supposed to take the exam after sleeping here? Zhou Yan immediately charged forward and shoved the boy who had spoken into the wall. His eyes bulged, blue veins standing out on his neck as he pointed at everyone in turn. What right do any of you have to blame Xinxin? She endured humiliation for this class and ran everywhere arranging food and lodging. You should be grateful instead of standing there complaining. If you can't stay here, then get out and sleep on the street. Let's see where you can possibly find a room at this hour. Zhou Yan's aggression immediately silenced the crowd. They also knew that part of what he said was true. Every hotel around the exam center was already displaying a no vacancy sign. If they dragged their suitcases back outside, the sidewalk would be their only bed. Tang Ning stood in a corner, her face pale and one hand gripping her suitcase handle. She looked around the room, then at the boys' hostile expressions. After a long hesitation, she lowered her head, clenched her teeth, and pulled her luggage into the foul-smelling room. By accepting the rooms, they gave up their last realistic chance to leave. They had barely divided up the rooms and had not even finished unpacking when a deafening crash came from behind the guest house. A construction crew next door was tearing out the foundations of an old building. Excavators roared, concrete drills screamed through the walls, and the floor trembled beneath their feet. Fine cement dust blew through gaps in the rotting window frames and settled over the mattresses and desks. Within minutes, every mattress, desk, and open book wore a thin gray film of dust. And that was not all. At 6 p.m, a cheap karaoke bar across the alley switched on its lights. Powerful speakers blasted harsh dance music, and the bass made the windows tremble. Shrill singing carried directly into every cramped room occupied by Class 1201. Tang Ning sat on a bed covered with yellowed sheets, pressing both hands over her ears as tears of despair spilled down her face. She opened her phone and stared at my profile picture. Her fingers trembled as she began to type a plea for help, but then she let her hand fall helplessly. What good would it do to ask for help now? I had warned her. She had chosen to trust the wrong person. I dried my hair, wrapped myself in a soft silk bathrobe, and stood before the floor-to-ceiling window on the top floor of the Daijing Hotel, watching the city lights come on. Messages continued pouring into the new class chat. Several students quietly complained that the noise made studying impossible, but Zhou Yan immediately shut them down. He called them spoiled brats and said that anyone who could not endure hardship should not bother taking the entrance exam. Luo Xinxin pretended to have a headache, sent a message saying she needed to rest, and disappeared. I smiled without humor. The night was only beginning. They had trusted Luo Xinxin, followed the crowd, and tried to pressure me into doing the same. Now they would have to face the consequences of that choice. The doorbell rang, and hotel staff wheeled in my room service dinner. A tender Wagyu beef steak, a steaming bowl of shark fin soup, and fresh salmon salad. I ate each dish slowly, giving my body the best possible fuel for the exam. Afterward, I called for the dishes to be cleared and adjusted the air conditioner to a comfortable temperature. I climbed into the soft bed, pulled the blanket to my chest, and closed my eyes. By 8 p.m, The construction noise had grown even worse. The piling drill screamed in piercing bursts from the site next door. Each burst seemed to bore through the students' skulls. The vibrations shook dust from the ceiling onto the tables, while old ceiling fans clattered uselessly in the oppressive summer heat. Tang Ning forced her textbook open on the stained bed, pressing one hand over her ear. But the words seemed to move across the page, and she could no longer concentrate. At 8:30, the karaoke bar reached full volume. Deafening dance tracks in off-key singing poured through the dirty windows, while the bass shook the glass in its frames. Complaints began erupting in the class chat. It's too loud. I can't concentrate at all. We have the Chinese language exam tomorrow. My head feels like it's being split open. The shared bathroom at the end of the hall has a broken faucet, and it smells horrible. I'm going to throw up. Gathering all her courage, Tang Ning typed, Zhou Yan, could you ask Xinxin whether the girls can change rooms? My wall is covered in mold, and I've broken out in a rash all over my hands. Zhou Yan responded immediately, attacking everyone who had complained. Stop acting like spoiled brats. Everyone is dealing with the same conditions, so learn to handle them. Xinxin spent the entire day finding us a place to sleep. She's already exhausted. Do you still want to torment her? Anyone who can't stand it can get out and sleep on the street. Stop complaining here. After that outburst, the complaints stopped. No one dared say another word. They gritted their teeth and endured, telling themselves this was the final hardship they had to survive before university. At 9:30 that night, someone pounded on the rotting wooden doors. The landlady came upstairs carrying several enormous plastic bags. Inside were dozens of crushed foam meal boxes, their outsides smeared with greasy grime. The girl in the white dress ordered this food for you. Eat it quickly, clean up the boxes, and don't throw garbage all over the hallway. The landlady tossed the bags onto the floor and stalked away. The students had been starving all afternoon and immediately crowded around to divide the meals. But the moment they opened the lids, a sharp sour odor rushed into their noses. The nutritious exam night dinner Luo Xinxin had promised consisted of cold fried rice, a few strands of yellowed vegetables, and several boiled shrimp that gave off a sharp ammonia-like smell. It was obviously spoiled food, bought cheaply from roadside stalls. This tastes strange. I think the shrimp have gone bad, one boy said hesitantly, wrinkling his nose. Zhou Yan frowned, picked up a shrimp with his fingers, shoved it into his mouth, and chewed noisily. His expression changed at the revolting taste. But he forced himself to swallow. Then he cleared his throat and shouted, What do you mean, gone bad? Xinxin ordered seafood, so we would have enough energy for the exam tomorrow. She saved money for the class. This food is cheap and nutritious. What more do you want? Anyone who refuses to eat is disrespecting Xinxin and can stop calling me a friend. Pressured by Zhou Yan and driven by their empty stomachs, the students closed their eyes and hurriedly shoveled the spoiled rice down their throats. They forced themselves to swallow the cheap food, without realizing that, at the most critical moment of their lives, they were poisoning their own bodies. At the same time, in the most expensive VIP suite at the Daijing Hotel, I woke because I was thirsty. The room was cool and so quiet that I could hear my own breathing. I sat up, poured a glass of warm water, and checked the time on my phone. It was 11 at night. Dozens of notifications from the new class chat filled the lock screen. I skimmed Zhou Yan's messages, praising Luo Xinxin, and Tang Ning's hesitant complaints. I felt neither pleasure nor pity. The choices that had destroyed my previous life were unfolding again, one by one. This time I would not let them pull me down with them. I set the phone on the table and switched it off. The exam the next morning required a clear head. I returned beneath the blankets, closed my eyes, and sank into deep sleep again. At 2 a.m, the consequences finally hit the Peace Guesthouse. A pained moan tore through the cramped darkness. Tang Ning clutched her stomach and curled into a ball on the stained bed, beads of sweat soaking her forehead. Her stomach contracted in violent waves, and nausea surged into her throat. She flung aside the blanket and rushed from the room, toward the shared bathroom at the end of the hall. But the door was locked from inside. Sounds of violent vomiting and agonized groans came through it. "Open the door. I can't hold it anymore." Tang Ning pounded on the door, her legs trembling. Within minutes, pounding sounded everywhere. More than 40 students stumbled from their rooms, one after another. Some clutched their stomachs. Some were ghostly pale, and some vomited in the middle of the hallway before they could reach the bathroom. The smell of sickness mixed with damp mold and stale air, turning the corridor into a scene from a nightmare. Every door opened onto another frightened face. Another student doubled over in pain. "My stomach hurts so badly. Help me. I'm going to die." There was something wrong with the food. Those boxed meals were poisonous. "I'm vomiting bile already." Panic exploded. The entire hallway became a horrifying mess. Some students collapsed outside the bathroom and cried for their parents. 12 years of study, all their effort, and all their families' hopes were being threatened by severe food poisoning. The entrance exam would begin in only 6 hours. After 12 years of preparation, they now faced the possibility of entering the most important test of their lives exhausted, dehydrated, and barely able to stand. Terror took hold of them. Tang Ning leaned against the filthy wall and sobbed uncontrollably. She remembered Jiang Yue's warning and regretted her decision so deeply that it seemed to tear her apart. If she had dared to refuse, if she had paid more and rented her own room, she might now be sleeping peacefully instead of trapped in that wretched place. Zhou Yan was no better. He leaned against a doorframe, his face as white as paper, and both arms wrapped around his convulsing stomach. Yet he still held on to one desperate hope. Luo Xinxin was the class representative. Surely she had brought a first aid kit. "Move, I'm going to find Xinxin. She's in room 10 unmoored." Zhou Yan pushed past the students sprawled across the floor and staggered toward the first room in the hallway. With all the strength he had left, he pounded on the door. "Xinxin, open up. Everyone has food poisoning. Do you have medicine for stomach pain? Open the door." There was no answer. The room was utterly silent. Zhou Yan gritted his teeth and pounded harder. "Xinxin, are you sleeping that deeply? Open the door. Tang Ning is about to faint." The racket finally woke the landlady. Wearing a crooked nightgown, she stormed upstairs with a feather duster in her hand and pointed it at Zhou Yan. "You damned brats. Why are you screaming in the middle of the night? Are you going to let anyone sleep?" With bloodshot eyes, Zhou Yan grabbed her arm. "Do you have a spare key? My friend is inside. She may have fainted from food poisoning. Open the door and save her." The landlady yanked her arm away and stared at him, as though he were an idiot. She snorted and spat on the floor. "Save her, my ass. There's nobody in room 21 Morn." Zhou Yan froze. "What nonsense are you talking about? Xinxin clearly carried her suitcase into this room this afternoon. She carried it in, and then she carried it right back out." The landlady folded her arms and curled her lip in contempt. "That girl in the white dress collected your room money this afternoon. After she settled you all into your rooms, she dragged her suitcase outside and slipped away. She hailed a taxi at the entrance to the alley. I heard her tell the driver to take her to the 5-star Daijing Hotel on the main road. She said my guest house was filthy, that the bedbugs would bite her, and that she couldn't possibly sleep here." The landlady gave a bitter laugh. "I charged only 20 yuan per person for the rooms. She also chose the cheapest boxed meals, 10 yuan each. She took the rest of your money and used it to book herself a luxury room. You were cheated." A deathly silence fell over the hallway. Even the pain groans seemed to stop for several seconds. More than 40 pairs of bloodshot eyes turned toward the empty door of room 21 Morn. Zhou Yan stood frozen. The landlady's words shattered every excuse he had made for Luo Xinxin. The girl he had treated as flawless was the one who had stolen their money and pushed the entire class toward ruin. He remembered how he had humiliated Jiang Yue that afternoon and the cold, pitying look in her eyes. Only now did he understand that Luo Xinxin had used him as a shield while she carried out the fraud. Liar, you damned Luo Xinxin. A boy, who had once praised her to the skies, suddenly let out a piercing scream. He clutched his stomach and vomited a pool of yellow liquid. My future, my entrance exam, my family sold our entire herd of pigs so I could take this exam. She ruined May. Rage erupted and swallowed what little reason the students had left. They grabbed broken plastic stools and began smashing the guesthouse furniture in the hallway. Tang Ning sat on the floor, with her head buried against her knees, crying so hard that she could barely breathe. They hated Luo Xinxin to the bone. But there was no way to take revenge that night. The cramps in their intestines drained the last of their strength. With trembling hands, Zhou Yan pulled out his phone and called Luo Xinxin. Beep, beep, beep. The number you have dialed is currently unavailable. She had switched off her phone long ago and was sleeping soundly beneath warm blankets on a soft mattress, leaving everyone else in a corridor filled with vomit, garbage, and panic. No one at the Peace Guesthouse slept for even a second that night. Several students fainted from dehydration and had to be taken to the hospital by ambulance. The rest moved weakly between their rooms and the bathroom, waiting for the cruelest dawn of their lives. At 6:30 in the morning, sunlight filtered through the double curtains of my luxury suite and cast a warm band of light across the wool carpet. I opened my eyes and stretched in satisfaction. I had slept without dreams and without noise. My body felt fully recharged. I went into the bathroom, washed my face with warm water, and then sat calmly at the dining table. Breakfast prepared by the hotel chef consisted of a steaming bowl of abalone congee, a glass of warm milk, and several slices of crisp toast. I ate slowly, careful not to upset my stomach before the exam. By the time I finished, my body felt rested, my stomach felt settled, and my mind was perfectly clear. At 7:15, I picked up my transparent document bag and walked out of the Daijing hotel lobby. The exam center was less than 300 meters away. The morning air was fresh, and cool breezes lifted my spirits even further. With steady steps, I walked toward the school gate. By then, the area outside the exam center was packed with parents and students. Tension hung over everything. But one group at the corner of the road drew every eye around them. Class 1201. They dragged themselves toward the gate one heavy step at a time, looking like a group of people recovering from a serious illness. Every face was pale, their eyes dark with exhaustion and their lips drained of color. Several girls could barely walk and had to cling to one another's shoulders, occasionally clutching their stomachs and groaning. A few of the strongest and most aggressive boys now staggered with both hands pressed over their stomachs, cold sweat beading on their foreheads. Tang Ning walked in the middle of the group, her eyes swollen from crying all night. She hugged her document bag tightly to her chest and trembled as if she had a fever. The bright energy of students about to take the most important exam of their lives was gone. Their minds were foggy, and abdominal cramps consumed what little concentration remained. At that moment, a polished taxi stopped directly in front of the school gate. The door opened, and Luo Xinxin stepped out. She was still wearing the same white chiffon dress as the day before. Her hair was neatly combed, her makeup light and fresh, and her face radiant. She showed no sign of fatigue, in stark contrast to the condition of her classmates. The moment Luo Xinxin saw Class 1201, she put on an innocent expression, hurried over, and asked sweetly, "You all arrived so early. Did everyone sleep well last night? I told the landlady to prepare breakfast for you. Have you eaten?" That single question broke the last thread of restraint holding the students back. The students glared at her, wishing they had enough strength to tear the lying hypocrite apart. But the diarrhea had drained them. One boy summoned the last of his energy, pointed directly at Luo Xinxin, and screamed hoarsely, "You fraud! You still dare show your face. Where did you put our hotel money? The spoiled meals you gave us poisoned the entire class. Do you know that?" Luo Xinxin flinched and stepped back several paces. Her eyes widened and immediately filled with tears. "What are you talking about? I don't understand. I had stomach pain last night too. It was so bad that I took a taxi to the hospital and spent the night receiving IV fluids. I only managed to get here this morning. If everyone had food poisoning, why didn't you call me? Zhou Yan stood not far away, both arms wrapped around his stomach and the veins on his forehead bulging. He stared at Luo Xinxin with utter devastation in his eyes. You spent the night receiving IV fluids. He hissed through clenched teeth, his voice shaking with anger and pain. You're lying. The landlady saw you take your suitcase to the 5-star Daijing hotel last night. You stole our money so you could enjoy yourself. You ruined me, Xinxin. Zhou Yan's words sliced through Luo Xinxin's saintly mask like a knife. She panicked and stammered, trying to explain, but no words came. The crowd around them began pointing and whispering. They looked at Luo Xinxin with open contempt. Retribution had arrived faster than anyone expected. At that moment, however, the signal sounded for proctors to begin calling examinees inside. No one had the time or attention to settle accounts with her. Their lives and futures were hanging by a thread. I stood some distance away, leaning against the school wall with my arms folded and watching in silence. I had no intention of stepping forward to make the scene worse. The consequences of their choices were already unfolding without any help from me. Just as I turned toward the security checkpoint, a staggering figure blocked my path. It was Zhou Yan. His face was deathly white, and sweat soaked both temples. Bent over and clutching his stomach, he looked at me with a complicated expression and humiliating desperation. He knew I was cautious and always carried a small emergency medicine kit in my bag. Jiang Yue, he whispered, without a trace of yesterday's arrogance. I was wrong. I was blind to trust her. My stomach feels like it's being stabbed. Do you have any stomach medicine? Give me one pill. I'm begging you. The childhood friend, who had once sworn to protect me now, stood before me pleading for help. The nearby students also turned to me with longing in their eyes. Tang Ning bit her lip, tears gathering as she stepped back, unable to face me. I looked directly into Zhou Yan's eyes and touched the small pouch on the side of my backpack. It contained antidiarrheal tablets, the kind I carried for minor stomach trouble. One might have dulled his cramps for a while, but it would not treat severe food poisoning or dehydration. Giving him a pill could even encourage him to ignore symptoms that required immediate medical care. What he needed was professional treatment. My previous life had taught me a boundary I would not cross again. I would not take responsibility for people who had chosen to hurt me. Medical staff were already stationed near the exam center. Zhou Yan needed professional treatment, not a pill from the person he had mocked and threatened the day before. I do have medicine, I said calmly, but I'm not giving it to you. This is food poisoning. Go to the medical station. Zhou Yan froze. Why, Jiang Yue? Are you really going to watch me suffer without helping? I know I said cruel things yesterday, but this is the entrance exam. Are you trying to destroy my future? I gave a short, disbelieving laugh. Destroy your future? You made the choices that brought you here, not me. Yesterday, you mocked me, cornered me, and tried to force me to pay that fraud. Where is your class unity now? Today disaster has struck, and suddenly you expect me to save you. Go to the medical station. With that, I shoved past his shoulder and strode through the security checkpoint. Zhou Yan remained rooted to the spot. Then, clutching his stomach, he collapsed to the ground, tears of regret streaming across his twisted face. At 8 a.m, the first exam officially began. Chinese language and literature. I found the seat matching my admission number in the middle of the room. About 6 students from class 1201 were seated around me. The exam room was already tense, and their restrained groans made it even more suffocating. An announcement came over the loudspeaker. The proctors opened the sealed exam papers and distributed scratch paper. I calmly accepted my paper and scanned it once. The questions were familiar. Thorough preparation, combined with perfect physical condition, allowed my mind to operate at full capacity. I set my pen to the page, and neat, fluid lines of handwriting appeared one after another. The soft friction of the pen against the paper was soothing. For the students of Class 12A1, the exam room became a place of physical torment. They held their pens in trembling hands, while their stomachs cramped violently. Cold sweat soaked their clothes and answer sheets. Sleep deprivation and dehydration made the words on the page blur before their eyes. A heavy thud came from the row of desks on the left. A girl collapsed forward onto her desk, both arms clamped around her stomach, and burst into tears. "What's wrong?" A proctor hurried over and asked. "Mom, my stomach hurts so much. I can't see the words anymore," the girl sobbed, her voice filled with absolute despair. Less than 10 minutes later, a boy in the right corner suddenly raised his hand. His face had turned greenish pale. "Sir, please let me go to the bathroom. I can't hold it anymore." The proctor frowned and answered sternly, "Exam rules are extremely strict. Try to hold on a little longer. You cannot leave until at least 2/3 of the allotted time has passed." "Sir, I'm begging you. I really have food poisoning. Please let me out." The boy cried out miserably, dropped his pen, and staggered to his feet, trying to rush toward the door. But his legs gave way, and he collapsed in the middle of the aisle. The entire room fell into chaos. The proctor immediately called the medical staff, who brought a stretcher and carried him out. His Chinese language paper was left almost entirely blank. I kept my attention on my own paper. I had already learned the cost of allowing their choices to derail my future, and I would not repeat that mistake. I turned to the second page and continued developing my argument. People eventually face the consequences of their own choices. In my previous life, when I collapsed from food poisoning after a night of relentless noise, they had stood outside the door laughing and calling me weak. In this life, I would not let their crisis become mine. Time crept forward. For the poisoned students, pain dragged out every second. They clenched their teeth and tried to endure. But physical pain could not be controlled by willpower. 2 more students submitted nearly blank papers, one after another, and ran desperately toward the bathroom. When the long bell finally signaled the end of the first exam, I calmly wrote my final period, carefully checked my identifying information handed in my paper, and packed my belongings. As I stepped out of the exam room, I glanced back. Several answer sheets contained only a few trembling lines. Tears and sweat had soaked the paper, and some pages were creased beneath clenched hands. My classmates remained slumped over their desks without the strength to move. They had entered the room hoping willpower could overcome their condition. Now they knew exactly how much of the exam they had lost. Over the rest of that day and the next, the remaining exam papers passed in the same painful haze for Class 12A1. When the final bell rang, the entrance exam was officially over. The school gates opened, and hundreds of parents waited with flowers, cameras, and radiant smiles, eager to welcome their children after the most important exam of their young lives. None of them were prepared for what came through the gates. Instead, they were met by a sight so horrifying that no one could believe it. The students of Class 12A1 emerged on stretchers, carried by medical staff, or dragged themselves forward in heavy steps, leaning on one another for support. Every face was gray and gaunt, as if they had survived a serious illness. Some collapsed onto the sidewalk the moment they passed through the gate and vomited. Tang Ning's father dropped the bouquet of sunflowers in his hands and rushed forward to catch his unsteady daughter. "Tang Ning, what happened to you? How did you end up like this during the exam?" he shouted in panic. Tang Ning grabbed the hem of her father's shirt. All the fear and grievance she had suppressed for the past 2 days burst into uncontrollable sobbing. She pointed straight at Luo Xinxin, who was glancing around furtively and trying to slip into a taxi that had stopped nearby. "Dad, it was her. Luo Xinxin stole the class's hotel money. She trapped us in a cheap, broken-down guesthouse and made us eat spoiled boxed meals. The whole class got food poisoning, Dad. I couldn't finish my exams. I left my mathematics paper blank." Tang Ning's accusation was a spark thrown into a powder keg. The entire area outside the school gate erupted. When the other parents heard her, they stopped comforting their children and rushed over in fury, surrounding the taxi so Luo Xinxin could not escape. You stay right there. What do you mean, a cheap guest house? Didn't I transfer you 3,000 yuan for an all-inclusive room at a 5-star hotel? Where did you hide my money? The mother of one boy charged forward, seized the collar of Luo Xinxin's white chiffon dress, and dragged her out. Luo Xinxin's face lost all color. Trembling violently, she resorted to her usual crocodile tears. Mom, I didn't do it. The hotel suddenly canceled the rooms. I only wanted to help everyone find a temporary place to sleep. I didn't steal anyone's money. At that moment, Zhou Yan staggered out from behind the crowd. He had needed 2 bags of intravenous fluid at the school medical station just to endure the remaining exams. His eyes were red and bloodshot as he stared at Luo Xinxin. Shut your mouth. The guesthouse landlady told us everything. You collected 3,000 yuan from each person. But the room cost only 20 yuan per night. The spoiled boxed meals cost 10 yuan each. You pocketed the rest, so you could stay alone in a luxury suite. Do you know my family had to sell our only piece of land in the countryside so I could prepare for this exam? You damned bastard. Zhou Yan screamed until his voice was hoarse, stripping away the last of Luo Xinxin's innocent facade. When the parents heard him, their rage blazed even hotter. They had spent 12 years raising and educating their children, pouring in time, money, and hope, only for one girl's greed to ruin the most important exam of their children's lives. Call the police. Have her arrested. This vicious fraud cannot be forgiven. Call her parents. Didn't she say she had an uncle who managed the hotel? Bring him here and make him compensate us for our children's futures. Shouting and curses threw the entire street corner into chaos. Luo Xinxin was trapped in the middle of the crowd, crying and begging desperately. But no one showed her any mercy. After receiving the report, local police officers immediately arrived to restore order. 15 minutes later, Luo Xinxin's parents also reached the scene. They came on a battered electric bicycle, wearing mud-stained work clothes, their faces worn by hardship. Their appearance exposed Luo Xinxin's final lie. There had never been an uncle who managed a hotel. Her father was a construction worker, and her mother cleaned a small supermarket. Her family had very little money. Luo Xinxin's vanity had driven her to pretend she came from a wealthy family in front of the boys in class. She had ruthlessly drained her classmates' money to maintain that false image. When Luo Xinxin's father saw the police, his legs buckled, and he dropped to his knees on the scorching asphalt. He repeatedly knocked his forehead against the ground and apologized to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I failed to teach my daughter properly. Our family has no money. Please show mercy and forgive her. Please don't send her to prison. Forgive her. Then give my son his youth back. Pay compensation for emotional damage and reimburse the medical bills immediately. Not one parent was willing to yield. The scene made the cost of blind trust impossible to ignore. I stood at a distance with my arms folded, calmly watching everything. I felt neither satisfaction nor pity. They were facing the consequences of their own decisions. Just as I turned to hail a taxi home, an ice-cold hand grabbed the strap of my backpack. I stopped and looked back. Zhou Yan stood there, his once confident posture now hunched with exhaustion. Medical tape still covered the back of his hand, where the IV needle had been removed. The arrogance that once filled his eyes had been replaced by regret. Jiang Yue, he said, his voice trembling and tears gathering in his eyes. You were right, I was an idiot. I was blind to believe her. I ruined my exam papers. Tomorrow I have to return to the hospital for treatment. I truly regret it. He stepped closer and tried to take my hand. We grew up together. You understand me better than anyone, don't you? I was only deceived by her. Please forgive me. I'll repeat my final year. And after that, can we be friends like before? I stepped back and avoided his touch. Disgust rose in my throat. In my previous life, this same face and this same voice had called me selfish. These same hands had thrown my suitcase into the mud. Zhou Yan, stop making excuses, I said calmly. You weren't simply deceived. You enjoyed having someone depend on you because it made you feel important. You chose the crowd, and you chose to trample on me. Those were your decisions. Don't bring up our childhood friendship now just to seek comfort. From the moment you tried to force me to scan that payment code, there was no relationship left between us. With that, I turned and walked away without looking back even once. Behind me, Zhou Yan collapsed onto the sidewalk, buried his face in his hands, and cried out in despair. His sobs mixed with the voices of police officers, angry parents, and approaching ambulance sirens. For me, it marked the end of the darkest chapter of my life. 1 month later, the gaokao results were officially released. I scored 3.9 points and became the highest-scoring science track student in the province. When my admission letter from Imperial Capital University arrived, my parents prepared an elaborate family dinner to celebrate. The house was warm and joyful, and the future before me was filled with promise. As for Class 1201, their fate became a cautionary story for every younger student at the school. More than 90% of the class failed the exam or were admitted only to low-ranked vocational colleges. Zhou Yan spent half a month in the hospital. After he was discharged, he developed severe depression, locked himself in his room, and refused to see anyone. His parents had no choice but to arrange for him to suspend his studies while he received treatment. The Luo family suffered the worst fate. Under pressure from the law and dozens of parents, Luo Xinxin's parents were forced to sell everything they owned. They even borrowed from loan sharks to gather the enormous compensation payments. Luo Xinxin was expelled, with the fraud investigation, compensation claims, and family debts closing in around her. Any realistic path back to the entrance exam disappeared. Unable to repay their debts, her family eventually fled the city and moved from place to place to avoid their creditors. I stood before the airport windows, watching white clouds drift across the vast sky. My luggage had already been checked in, and my flight to Beijing was preparing to depart. I threw my old ATM card into a trash bin, severing my last connection to that city. Cowardice had dragged me into the mud once. This time I chose myself, and I kept walking toward the light.